it's the best way to do it would be if you could upload it onto my YouTube.
You have to give me access to that.
Yeah, I'll give you all the information. All right. So we'll start in about 2 minutes, okay?
Okay, there's a shir going on outside. Maybe we'll close the window.
Oh, okay, good. This is the Derech Hamuna. You're familiar with this? This is.
And actually, I don't know if I've ever seen the Sefer. I've always seen pieces.
Yeah, it's got like 6 volumes. I think I only have 2 or 3.
He wrote it to look like a Mishnah Berurah.
Unbelievable.
Exactly. He copied the Mishnah Berurah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant idea to do that. Really.
He's the Shar Tzion, the Be'er Halacha, the Mishnah
Everything. Exactly the same.
Who did that? Wasn't Rav Chaim?
Why not?
Because he wouldn't waste his time with like a Surah said daf of it.
Well, no, he probably, I don't know if he typed it or.
No, he for sure didn't type it.
Ah, okay. Yeah, so whoever typed it, I guess.
Yeah. I wonder. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that was.
No, I wouldn't.
This is literally
Well, my bris to Breslov Shir is on Thursday night in Zayed. Yeah. Oh, good morning, Howie.
Do you know Shlomi? You know the Chabad rabbi guy?
Oh, is he here right now? Oh, there he is.
A little small thing. We're outside.
Good, very good. So I hope to be with him. I think it's tomorrow night. Actually, he has a bringing. And tonight,
no, it was around from a previous year.
Right.
I mean,
morning, how are you, Howie? I say good morning to you and him. Yeah.
How you doing?
Good. Baruch Hashem. Tonight, if anyone's around, we have a shir in Alon Shvut. That's Masechta Sukkah Periklal Gadol. And if anyone's around, Wednesday nights we're in Sayed at Mishkan Tzipora at 7:30. 7:30 with Ma'ariv at 8:30. And we're learning the sugyas of Shofar and Rosh Hashanah. And then Thursday night, we'll be learning a little bit about Shiluach HaKan, first in Briska Lumdis, and then we're going on to some beautiful, beautiful insights of Rabbi Nosson of Breslov. All right, I just mentioned that as a unpaid advertisement. All right. The mitzvah, the mitzvah which is high profile in the Dapim and Ksubis that we're learning is the mitzvah of tzedakah. And tzedakah tatzil mimaves. Tzedakah is a mitzvah which is unique in the sense that HaKadosh Baruch Hu went out of his way to tell us, Uberachicha, I will give you, I'll bestow a bracha on you, which puts tzedakah into a category which is called matan schara betzido, and the Torah tells you what reward you will reap for the kiyum mitzvah, in this case of tzedakah. And we'll see how that impacts in halacha as well. Now, I have in front of me the Derech Hamuna of Reb Chaim Kanevsky in Hilchos Matnas Aniyim, and as an introduction, he quotes the Arizal. So now we see from, there's an overlap of worlds over here, and he says that according to the Arizal, the mitzvah of tzedakah is so important and so holy that he should do it b'leiv sholem u'besimcha. Imagine the chief of the entire literature world in today's world. Again, he was nifta not long ago. Reb Chaim Kanevsky introduces Hilchos Matnas Aniyim, Perek Zayin, with the words that we have to have simcha when we fulfill this mitzvah. He goes on to say that according to the Arizal, when you give tzedakah, you should stand. It's interesting, people come around with the pushka in the morning. I don't know, here they don't have that minhag, but we'll get to that point, I'm sure. And you should stand before you put the money in. You should give biyad yamin, ba'amida. And he says that Yosef tov litein tzedakah bayom v'lo balayla. Okay, we'll see if we can make any sense out of that we should be giving tzedakah during the day and not at night. Okay.
I know Shechter always said that the reason that we stand in the first one of bris is because that's when we're supposed to get tzedakah also.
Ah, interesting. Wow.
The Gemara is dafka by tzedakah. They'll say a person who gives tzedakah not lishma is a tzaddik gamur.
Right.
We don't see that by on the flip side.
Right. Interesting.
We don't have by
that's unique to tzedakah also. Right. Now, Rabosai, I have here for you, I guess it's in your phone. Maybe ideally we should print it out. I don't know. The essay here on Mitzvat Tzedaka v'Shiura in the Otzer Hayudim on Ksubis in the 4th volume. So I hope you got it in your phone. If you didn't get it in your phone, then it could be we don't have your contact information, so you'll let us know about that. And this essay is divided up into 5 different sections. We're going to focus our attention probably on 2 out of the 5. So the rest is your homework when you get a chance. It's a beautiful piece. And I would like to focus our attention on a tshuva of the Mariel Diskin. And this is going to be the introduction to Ashia today. So if you have these pages, you might even see Nun Aleph as the opening page. And then if you turn the page, you'll see Nun Bet. And if you're on the right column, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph down. He says, Hamariel Diskin, so he was the Rav in the city of Brisk, writes in a tshuva, Shemitzvas Tzedaka, Efshar Lekaima, Af Bepachos Mishava Pruta. V'lo nemar shir Pruta B'kiyum Mitzvas Tzedaka. Can anyone tell me why this is a radical revolutionary chiddush? Why would you assume intuitively that the minimum for tzedakah would be a shava pruta? Is not mammon. Less than shava pruta is not mammon. The mitzvah of tzedakah is a mitzvah of mammon. I have to give my mammon to the ani, and mammon, the minimal shear of mammon in Kol HaTorah Kula, is always a shava pruta. In fact, even in the Isser of Me'ilah, Behegdesh, the minimum for Me'ilah and Hegdesh has nothing to do with Kezayis, as it does in all other Isurim, but rather the minimum shear is a Shava Pruta, which means that if I have Hana from Hegdesh to the value of a Shava Pruta, then I'm Chayav for Me'ilah, with all the dinim of Me'ilah. If it's less than a Shava Pruta, it's not moment, I did not steal anything from Hegdesh. So let's leave this on the side for a moment. We're going to see in a minute how the Mariel Diskin came to this conclusion. And we're going to see how the Stipler, the father of Reb Chaim Kanevsky, Zichron Livracha, rejects this principle of the Mariel Diskin and the proof that is from a sugya in Perek HaKonis. Okay, so let's leave that for a moment. So again, this is just the background of my shir for today. I want you to keep in mind the tshuva, I call it the revolution of the Mariel Diskin, that the shir of mammon in Kol Dinei Mammonos of a Shava Pruta does not apply to the mitzvah of tzedakah.
If you steal less than a Shava Pruta, don't you get malchus?
That I'd have to learn the sugya at the end of Makis of bitlo v'lo bitlo, kimo v'lo kimo. Gzela is a lavanitical essay. The question is, if he destroys the object, then if you hold bitlo v'lo bitlo, he gets malchus. So now you're saying that since there's no ashava, because less than shav pruta, maybe he gets malchus. I don't know. I'd have to study. But you know what? We have so much to cover today. That would take another hour, if not more, to really be ma'ayin in that. Okay. Having said that, let's take a look at a section here, which I hope you have, which is called B'din Kfir B'mitzvah Tzedaka. Again, if the page, if somebody could tell me where the page numbers came out, or am I wasting time by telling you? Yes? If the page numbers came out, take a look on page Nun Hey. And you'll see on the right column, section Dalid, which is called B'din Kfir B'mitzvah Tzedaka. And here we want to study a very profound insight of Rabbi Shmuel Grozovsky, the Rashiva of Panovich. You should know on the way, this is not a political statement, but the Otzer Hayunim in general is very much influenced by Reb Shmuel. So that it's a slightly different derech halimud, but it's very, very close. It's like clearing a chakir. What's the difference between Reb Chaim Brisker and Reb Shimon Shkop? Right down the middle there, that's where you have Reb Shmuel. In any event, here's the deal. The Gemara says in Masechta Bava Basra Daf Chesam and Beis, which is probably the most important sugi in Shas for the mitzvah of tzedakah, that there's kfir on tzedakah, that you could force a person to give tzedakah. Bezdin kofen oso al tzedakah kederech shekofen al kol mitzvahs, and the Rambam codifies that in Perek Zayin Milchus Matnas Aniyim Halacha Yud Misheina Rotza Litein tzedakah, etc., etc. Bezdin kofen also. Tosfos there, Afanart, in Bava Basra, raises the question. There's a principle in the Gemara in Chulin Daf Kuf Yud Amid Beis that called mitzvah shematan Torah matan schar b'tzida ein kofen ola. There's no kfiyas bezdin on kibbut avayim, for example. This is mine. Oh. Okay, I'm sorry. I meant to shut this off, and somehow I thought I did press. I thought I pressed power off, but you have to press power off twice. Okay, so then, since Kibbut Avim says Laman Yarichun Yomecha, which means that the Torah already explicitly gives you the matan schar for Kibbut Avim, therefore there's no kfir. Bezdin will not force you for the mitzvah of Kibbut Avim. Tosfos asked the following question. In the parsha of Tzedakah, the Torah says, "Biglal adover hazeh yivarech Hashem." So the matan schar for the mitzvah of Tzedakah is explicit in the Torah, and therefore, given the principle of the Gemara in Chulin, there should be no kfir on the mitzvah of Tzedakah. It's matan schara b'tzida. Why is it that the Gemara establishes and the Rambam codifies it that there is kfiyas bezdin on the mitzvah of what? Of tzedakah. Everybody have the kasha? Again, let's go over it one more time. The principle of the Gemara in Chulin is that a mitzvah shematan schara b'tzida ein kofen oleh. Tzedakah is a mitzvah shematan schara b'tzida, and yet the Gemara says, and we pass on halacha, that kofen al mitzvah tzedakah. That's the kasha of Tosfos. Tosfos quotes the Ri as an answer, and he says the following. When you open up the Rambam in Hilchos Matnas Aniyim Perek Zayin, which is the mitzvah saseh litein tzedakah aniyim, the Rambam writes that the source for the mitzvah of tzedakah is pasoach tiftach es yodcha lo. Lo means to a Jew and not to a non-Jew. V'nemar, and the Rambam quotes another pasuk, v'chzakta bo ger tosha v'cheimach. So we're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out why the Rambam adds another source and whether or not this other source is really logically appropriate here. Okay, but let's leave that out. Then the Rambam writes, Kol haroeh ani mevakesh vehelim einov mimenu v'lo nasan lo tzedakah avar b'lo taseh shenemar lo ta'ametz es levavcha v'lo tikpots es yodcha me'achicha ha'evyon. Now, I'm not sure if there are two different lavim here, but in any event, there's at least one lav. The Rambam has the lo taseh of lo ta'ametz es levavcha and the lo taseh of lo tikpots es yodcha. You can imagine a person who feels for the ani, so he doesn't violate the Isur of lo ta'ametz es levavcha. He's not totally callous. But on the other hand, he's kofetz es yado. He's not able to give. You know the famous story about the Rav of Yerushalayim, Reb Shmuel Salanta, when he said that we're in such poverty here in Yerushalayim, and there's only one wealthy person. Again, I don't know what that means, wealthy person 120 years ago in Yerushalayim, but anyway, relatively, and he's a kabtzon. He's very difficult. You can't get any money out of him. And the community was literally desperate, and they asked Reb Shmuel, please, see if you could go and get tzedakah from him. And Reb Shmuel says it's almost impossible. Ein somchen al hanes. This man cannot give tzedakah. But in any event, the situation was so desperate, Reb Shmuel came. The mayor was so impressed that the Rav of Yerushalayim came to see him. And he invited him in. Reb Shmuel poured out the situation of the Aniyim in Yerushalayim. and the man started shaking. And he went into his closet, took out the keys, put it on the table. These are the keys to his kasefet. And he says, look, Rabbeinu, I can't do this, but here are the keys. You go into my safe and give tzedakah. So on the one hand, he had that feeling in his heart, and he did not violate lotavis, but he couldn't actually be posech as yodcha, unless you want to say that Rav Shmuel was a shliach, and therefore he didn't violate the lav. In any event, the Rambam has a lav with regard to someone who refuses to give tzedakah when the ani is mevakish. Says Tosfos in the name of the Ri that although the mitzvah aseh of pasoach tiftach in tzedakah is matan schar betzida, and therefore there would be no kfir. But since there's an additional lav, therefore there's kfir midin kofin ala mitzvahs on the lav. So that if a person refuses to give tzedakah when he has the capacity to do so, Beis Din will force him, not because of the essay, but because of the lotas. So far, so good. That's Tosfos in Baba Basra Daf Ches. The Mishnah Melech asks a stira in the Ramban. The Ramban, on the one hand, accepts the principle of Tosfos that in tzedakah there is a din of kfir, and it seems because of the lav. And yet the Ramban writes in a tshuva, which you'll see here on the top of your left column, that in the mitzvah of Hashavas Ha'avot, right, so the Malva takes a mashkon from the lover, and the halacha is that he has to return the mashkon with all the different dinim, maybe on a daily basis. And the Ramban says in a tshuva that there's no kfir on the mitzvah of Hachzoras Ha'avot. Why not? Because it's matan schara b'tzida. Now, the Torah gives the malveh a schar, and this is explicit in the Torah, for returning the avot to the loveh. And the Ramban says, therefore, there's no kfir, because since the Torah explicitly mentions the schar, it becomes what? Matan schara b'tzida. The Shulchan Aruch writes that we don't force a person to return the avot because it's matan schara b'tzida. So now the Mishnah Melech raises the following question in the Parsha of Hashavas Avot. In addition to the mitzvah, the aseh that's imposed upon the malveh to return the avot, the Torah says lo tishkav be'avoto. And the Rambam in the 3rd chapter of Malva V'Lova paskins that if you violate this lav and you don't return the avot, then you're chai for the lav. Now we just established, according to the Ri, and the Ramban seems to accept the principle of the Ri, that if you have both an essay and a lotaseh, despite the fact that the essay is matan schara b'tzida, because there's an attached lav, therefore the principle is kofin ala mitzvah because of the lotaseh. So why is it that the Ramban, and that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins, formulates the principle that there's no kfir on what? On Hashavas Avot because of the matan schar b'tzida, but what about the lav of lo tishkav ba'avoto? So the Mishnah Melech tries to answer this question, and he says the following.
What page are you on?
We're on page Nun Hey on the left column, and we're up to the 3rd paragraph, or the 2nd full paragraph. He says, Kol Divrei Ramban. He wants to make the following distinction. He says that when you have a lav hanitakli essay, and the lav is directly connected to the essay, like, for example, the case of lo tishkach ba'avoto, then the same logic that undermines the normal universal halach of kfir that applies to the essay will apply to the losas. The losas is nothing more than the flip side of the essay. And if you're going to tell me that since the essay has matan schara b'tzida, then the matan schara b'tzida expands its wings to encompass the lotus as well, because the essay and the lotus go together. And that's what we have in Hashavas Ha'avot. The Mishnah Melech, however, says that in the case of tzedakah, the essay and the lotas are separate entities. Now, why is that so? Why isn't the lotas just simply a lav hanitak liyaseh? And he explains the following. If you read the Rambam carefully, and Reb Chaim Kanevsky in his Derech Hamunah makes a big deal about this, the Rambam opens up Perek Zayin with Mitzvah Aseh Litein Tzedaka. And then when he gets to the lotas, he doesn't just say the Misha Bitel Mitzvah Aseh Zu Over Belotaseh. He has an introduction. He writes, Kol haroeh ani mevakesh vehelim einov mimenu v'lo nosan lo tzedaka avar belotaseh. And the Mishnah Lamelech and many others are medayik from the Rambam that the violation of the lav is because of the re'iyah, or at least the idea of the ani who's mevakesh. So I don't violate a lav simply because there are niyam in the world and I didn't supply them with tzedakah. When I violate the lav chas v'shalom, that's because the ani is there, he's mevakesh, and helim einov mimenu. That's the violation of the lav. The essay, on the other hand, is not conditional on the fact that the ani is there to be mevakesh. And what that means is, therefore, we separate between the essay and the lotas because they are fundamentally different. The machayev of the essay is the fact that I have money and there's a need out there amongst the aniyim. That itself generates an essay. But the lotas is only violated if and when I see the ani, or at least I know about the ani, and he is a mevakesh. Therefore, if we apply the logic of the Mishnah Lamelech, we can understand the difference between Hashavas Avot, where the Ramban in his Tshuva says there's no kfiyah. And why is there no kfiyah, even though there's a lav of lo tishkav, but nevertheless the lav is attached to what? To the essay. And if the lav is attached to the essay, then the matan schara of the essay spreads its wings and encompasses the lotus as well. Masha Einken, in the case of tzedakah, there's halacha of kofin al tzedakah is established by the sugi in Bava Basra Daf Ches, despite the fact that there's a lotus, because now we're wedging between the essay and the lotus. So they're two separate machayvim. The machayv of the essay is the fact that I have the wherewithal to supply tzedakah for the aniyah, whereas the lotus is generated and it emerges with the bakasha of the ani, as the Rambam says, hara ani mevakesh vehelim einov mimenu, then of our lotas.
So you can only really be kofin if there's an active bakasha.
In a case where the lav applies, because of the lav will have kfir. When does the lav apply? Eli says very well, it's conditional on the fact that there's an ani mevakesh. And then if he's malim einov, he violates the lav, and therefore we could be kofa him to give the ani tzedakah. Okay.
Maybe you could say that applies even when the ani isn't there. In other words, once the lav is a different sort of lav, so it makes the assay not one that undermines.
I'm not sure why you'd want to say that, but we'll think about it.
That would make more sense though, because the fact, without even having understand, if you're talking about for a tzedakah fund, if you have a gabbai cycle collecting for it, he doesn't have an ani that's standing in front of him at that moment. He's responsible for the aniyim that exists, and therefore it might apply.
But I'm just saying that essay is not, that essay of giving to a fund is matan schar b'tzida. So I don't know if you focused on that essay, and the Torah says uberachecha.
But the fund is there. The fund is there. The fund has a list of people that need. They may not.
No, but I'm asking how are you willing to say that if he doesn't give to the fund, he violates the lav? No, you're not willing to say that, right? Because it's not roeh einov. The Rambam says malim einov, right? Helim einov. So then you're left with the essay, and I would think intuitively, if you're left with the essay, then you apply the principle of matan schar b'tzida.
If there exists a significant number of aniyim around, even if he's not standing there, I think he might be over the law.
Oh, so that's what the Reb Chaim Kanevsky declares back and forth on this. He says, Loro Ehu, Afal Pi, you have this also on your phone, by the way. Lora Ehu, Afal Pi, Sheyodea sheyesh ani eino over balav. So he knows that they're aniyim, but he doesn't see the ani.
I can't argue with that.
No. Wait a minute. No, he backtracks. Howie, you're looking at the Havamina. Let's look at the Maskana. He says that umashma dafkim ra'eu avalim lo bikesh mimenu afal pi sheyodea. Okay, so actually, he's inclined towards that. Okay, fine. Let's leave that for the moment. What I really want to get to here, this is the kishkis of the Shia today, is a beautiful insight, very profound, of Reb Shmuel, which you'll see here in the next paragraph. Reb Shmuel was the Rosh Yeshiva of Panovich, Rozovsky, and he passed away, I would say, about 20 years ago, maybe. You could fill up an entire shelf with his insights into Shas, Sfarim upon Sfarim. In any event, he says the following. We're again on page Nun Hey. That's on the left column, towards the middle of the column. Okay, then? Well, again, I'm going to put it all together in one package, and we're going to try to see if we can figure this out. Why is it, asks Reb Shmuel, that if the essay is supported by a lav, then Tosfos in the name of the Ri and the Ramban both assume that we suspend the principle of matan schara b'tzida, and we do apply kfir, like in the case of tzedakah. Why is that so? One way of saying it is that the matan schara b'tzida is a principle that applies to an essay. It doesn't apply when there's a lotas. But Reb Shmuel offers a second approach, not the mechanical, technical approach, but a much more profound, almost logical approach. And he says the following. In addition to the din of kfiyah ala mitzvahs, there's another din, another principle that's very, very similar. And that's called lafrushe mi isura. And that means that if I see someone who chas v'shalom is about to be machal Shabbos, then I separate him from chil Shabbos, even if it means perhaps, again, I don't want to get into this now, even if it means that I have to physically prevent him in whatever form and shape I use. Fine. So Shmuel wants to know, we have a principle in the Gemara in Bava Kama, excuse me, that's called Ovid Inish Dina Lenafshe. So it means if you're about to, let's say, damage my property or steal my property, I'm allowed, according to that opinion, to take the law, so to speak, proverbially, into my hands, into my own hands, and do whatever I have to do to prevent you from destroying my property. Ovid Inish Dina Lenafshe. Frekt Reb Shmuel, why do we need this whole machlokes, this whole issue about Ovid Inish Dina Lenafshe? Dalmi hochi, drop it. Typically, mi dina frushe misura mafreshinon. He's about to steal my property. He's about to damage my property. That's a violation of an Isur. Again, exactly what the Isur of Mazik is, come back for another Shia. There are at least 7 possibilities, but whatever it is, he's violating an Isur. Is afrushe misura mafreshinon. It doesn't matter. Afreshui Isur means that if I see that you're about to violate an Isur, I could be no Germedover, I have to do whatever I have to do to separate you. Says Reb Shmuel, an unbelievable breakthrough chiddush. He says the following. There's a fundamental difference between Ovid Inish Dina Lenafshe and Afrushe Isura. Afrushe Isura applies to Isur Veheter. But when the Machayev is Mammon, then it doesn't come under a Frushe Isura, but it comes under a different halacha. Then in Mammon, we have a din of Kofen ala mitzvahs, whenever that applies. So take a look inside, just that you see it inside. He says the following. Muchach mizeh, on the very bottom of Nun Hey, going on to Nun Vav, Dechol din afrushe meisur hu rak b'makom she'eno din mamon. It's a din isur. Like for example, chilul Shabbos. Ulam b'makom shezeh isur sheyesh bo din mamon. It's the yisod and the machayev of the isur is mamon. Lo nemar din lafrushe meisur. So when it says in Shas, Isura mimamona lo yalfinan, or mamona misura lo yalfinan, we make a fundamental distinction between two categories, mammon and isur. According to Shmuel, one particular nafkamina or one manifestation of that distinction would be that whereas in isura we apply the din of afrushe meisura, in mammon we don't apply the principle of afrushe meisura. That's a din mammon. And if it's a din mammon, then we have to come on to ovid inish dinil and nafshe. We can't apply, I see you're about to steal my property. I can't apply the principle of frusha misur because it's a din mammon. But what will I apply? I'll apply the principle of ovid inish dinil and nafshe. For the sake of saving my mammon, according to that man the Omar, I'll do whatever I have to do. So those are two different principles. One principle applies to Isa v'heter, and that's Afrushe Meisura. And there's another principle called Ovid Inish Dina L'Nafshe, and that applies to a Din Mama. He says, according to that, we can really shed a light on Tosfos in Bava Basra Daf Ches in the name of the Ri, and the Ramban, the way the Mishnah Melech interprets the Ramban. He says, wait, just give me just 2 minutes, because again, I'm hot and I want to get to the punchline. He says the following: when does the principle of matan schara b'tzida apply, and when does it not apply? Tosfos says that in the case of tzedakah, the matan schara b'tzida does not apply, and there's kofin al mitzvah tzedakah because it's supported by a law. However, in the case of Hashavas Ha'avut, as we saw in the Tshuvas Ramban, we apply the principle of Matan Schara B'Tzida. The Torah says that you will be blessed by returning the Avot, right? And the Ramban says that therefore, since it's Matan Torah B'Tzida, therefore, Ein Kofin Al Hashavas Ha'avot. And we explained that it really depends upon whether the lav is coming to support the essay or it's separate. Says Rab Shmuel in the paragraph on Nun Vav, Dibra Maschamei Ata, if you fast forward to line 5 or so, Bitzdaka, halav eino chiyuv mamoni, elahu isur, v'lachein shayach bo din lafrushe me isura, ובמקום שיש דין אפרושי מאיסור יש כפייה אף במתן שכר בצידה. Watch what goes on here. Reb Shmuel wants to analyze whether the lav is coming to support the essay or it's a separate entity. And he's differentiating, as we saw, between tzedakah and the lav of lo tametzes levavcha on the one hand, and Hashavas Ha'avot, where the Torah adds a lav of lo tishkav on the other hand. And he says the following: in the case of tzedakah, the essence of tzedakah and the lav of lo ta'ametz es levavcha, that is din isur. And if it's din isur, which principle is going to apply? Afrushe meisura. And Afrushe meisura now comes to the hands of Bezdin, and Bezdin will force him to give tzedakah because of the yesod of Afrushe meisura that applies to tzedakah. Masha Ein Kain, in contrast, the din of Hashavas Ha'avot is a din mammon, which means that the Malvit took the mammon of the lova, and now he has to return on a daily basis the mammon of the lova. The lav is coming to support the din mammon, and if he violates this halach, and instead of giving back the avot, he sleeps on the avot that night, then he violates the lav. This lav is a din mammon. And if it's a din mammon, then Afrushe Misura doesn't apply. The lav and the essay form one entity, and it's matan schara b'tzida. And if it's matan schara b'tzida, there's no kfiyah ala mitzvahs. Yaakov, you wanted to ask something? I'm sorry, I just wanted to finish that. Everybody have this? Again, let's get it. This is very, very profound. He's saying the following: there's a fundamental difference between tzedakah on the one hand and hashavas ha'avad on the other hand. He writes that tzedakah is not a chiyuv mamon, but rather it's isur. So when the Torah says lo ta'ame, it says levavcha, the Torah is creating an isur. What shall I say? It's like eating tarfa, so it's like chilul Shabbos. But therefore, once we have a halacha that this lav indicates or generates a din isur, then what kicks in? What principle applies? Afrushim isura. Afrushim isura, therefore, bezdin kofin al tzedakah. But in the case of Hashavas ha'avot, af sheyesh b'zeh lav, he says the lav itself is a din mamon. In other words, give up on your mamon. Meaning you took the avot, your Mr. Malve, the lender, and now give it back. That's Hashavas mamon. If it's Hashavas mamon, then there's no din of Afrushim isura. If there's no din of Afrushim isura, then the lav and the essay form one entity, indivisible, and we apply the principle of essay matan schar b'tzida. And the essay now, as we said before, spreads its wings and what? And encompasses the lav as well, and therefore there's no kfiyah. So we now understand why the Ramban on the one hand would hold that there's no kfiyah in the mitzvah of Hashavas ha'avot, but on the other hand, in the mitzvah of tzedakah, there is kfiyah.
I don't know if you mentioned this, but if you look where the Shulchan Aruch clarifies both of these halachas, Hashavas ha'avot is in kosher mishpat and tzedakah is in yodayah.
Excellent. Hashavas ha'avot, he says brilliantly, is in Choshen Mishpat because it's Yisodo Shel Davar is Din Mamon. Where does the Shulchan Aruch classify the laws of tzedakah? In Yoredeah, which is all about Isa v'Heter, which is all about the Machalos Asuros and so forth and so on. Beautiful. Now, this, I believe, will shed a light on the tshuva of the Maril Midiskin that we started with today. The Maril Midiskin, as I said before, has a revolution of sorts. And he says that you could be Makayim the mitzvah of tzedakah with what? Pachos mishava pruta. And we ask the question, what do you mean pachos mishava pruta? Exactly. Pachos mishava pruta is not mammon. But the answer is that the yesod and the machayev of tzedakah is not dini momenos. If it was dini momenos, there would be no room for the Maril Midiskin's chiddush. Obviously, the Maril Midiskin, who was again almost a century before Reb Shmuel Rozovsky, he understood like Reb Shmuel that the yesodus of tzedakah and the machayev is din isur. And if it's din isur, then it doesn't matter whether you have a shova pruta or not. And as I mentioned before, in Me'ilah, we have different shittas about what's the minimum shear for the violation of Me'ilah. If you hold that the minimum shear is a shava pruta, then what's the yesod of Me'ilah? A din mammon. And why is it a din mammon? Because hegdesh is mammon, hegdesh bekinyano. And when a person is moel behegdesh, he's basically stealing from hegdesh. And therefore, he has to steal a minimum of what? Of a shava pruta. But if you want to say that Me'ilah is din isur v'heter, you're not allowed to have hanoah and take the benefit for yourself from hegdesh, then that isur would generate halacha even in a pachos mishava pruta. I'm not sure halacha. I know Reb Chaim has a lot of Torah on this. What is the minimum shear of Me'ilah? You can look in Reb Chaim in Hilchos Me'ilah. I think you'll find it. In any event,
Can you explain the logic though behind why tzedakah would be?
I'll tell you what I think. I'm going to throw out a sentence now, and I hope you'll all throw rotten tomatoes at me. Because l'chora, it's a pella to say such a thing. We know that in Maser, there's an Isur Tevel. Until you mafresh Maser, you have a Chefetz of Tevel, which if you eat it, you chayiv misa b'dei shamayim. It's an avera chamura. I'm going to suggest the following, and again, you should run me out of here for saying this, that there's a din Tevel in Mammon because of the mitzvah of tzedakah. That until you're mafresh tzedakah, then you are violating the Isur Tevel. No, I'll tell you why. The Torah says aser to aser, correct? And this is the source for Meiser Ksofim. What do you mean aser to aser? Okay. So you'll tell me I'm crazy, right? But I'll tell you where I came up with this chiddush. What I learned last night here in this essay, which I want to share with you, that there are two fundamentally different machayvim in tzedakah. One is called keren, and the other is called revach. So let's say, for example, my wife and I got married, and we have X amount of money in our bank account. Okay, it wasn't a very big sum, but whatever it was, that's called keren. Then, okay, at that point I was in the Grus Kolel, so I don't know how much revach I made, but let's say I take a job, 9 to 5, I do some overtime also, and I get a salary. That's called revach. In my mind, again, I'm just revealing my amaratzis, I never would have... Well, let's say I inherited a keren. Let's say Lu Yitzuyu. But it's not revach, it's called keren. Why? Because it wasn't schar, it wasn't something that was given to me as wages. So you'll ask me, my nafgemina, why would it enter to, and again, yesterday I was an Amoritz. Today I'm a Talmud Chacham, a shtickler. And I'm going to prove to you in Rambam, in Tur, in Poskim, that there are two fundamentally different machayvim. One is the machayv of tzedakah on keren, and the other is the machayv on income, on schar. Something that never, ever entertained in my life. Right? How did we say in Chazal? Ein beis medrash below chidush. Where did I come up with this? This is based on a Yerushalmi at the beginning of Pei.
Are you talking about a case where the keren that you had was presumably revach of someone else who already took meiser off it before you got your portion of it? I mean, to a certain point, my father supported me. He gave tzedakah. I'm not going to take tzedakah off the portion that he gives me from his money that he made tzedakah on.
I don't know. Hold on to that question, Daniel. It's too advanced for me. This is such a big chiddush for me. What does it say in the Yerushalmi? We'll see it inside in just a second. If you want to turn to the page, it's here on page Nun Beis. You have Nun Beis 52 on the left column on the bottom. Crucial. This Yerushalmi is very relevant to the question of how much of my assets do I have to give to tzedakah. Right? There was a takana, as we learned in Ksubis, of Holchei Usha, Al Hamavazbeis, Al Yivazbeis, Yoser Michomish. Okay, then we're going to have to decide what that means. Does that mean that you should give up to a chomish but not beyond a chomish? Does that mean you should give less than a chomish but you could give up to many different variants? But the Yerushalmi asks the following kasha, and you'll see it. It's the very last lines on page Nun Beis, on the left column. Listen to the question of the Yerushalmi. If I have to give a chomesh, every year I give a chomesh, what am I left with after 5 years? 0. Again, you might say, well, I'll give a chomesh of the original 100, and then I'll give another chomesh of the 80. For example, I'm always left with more. If you're learning the Sukkos and Ksubos, you'll know what I'm talking about. But forget about that. The Yerushalmi is not aware of that. The Yerushalmi thinks that whatever you started with, we'll call it 100. If you give 20% year in and year out annually, you'll be ending up with nothing. That's the Yerushalmi's cash. So what does the Yerushalmi answer? The Yerushalmi's machalik between keren and schar. As far as keren is concerned, give a chomesh, and as we say, v'shalom al Yisrael, finito. You're finished. What chiyuv of tzedakah do you have beyond the 20% of your keren? Revach. And on the revach, you're going to give 20%. Clearly, according to the Yerushalmi, again, this is my language, but I think this is what the Yerushalmi is saying, there are two different, fundamentally different machayvim of tzedakah. There's one chiyuv tzedakah on the keren, and there's another chiyuv tzedakah on the revach. And let me show this to you inside. The Yerushalmi here says the following. B'yusha, 3 lines before the end of Nun Beis. B'yusha nimnu, nimnu means nimnu v'gamru, they took a vote, and they decided shei other mafresh chomesh minachasav lemitzvah, which, by the way, seems to assume that according to the Yerushalmi, you have to give a chomesh. We used to thinking you have to give Maser, but in any event, we'll get back to that later. So Rabbi Nachman turns to Rabbi Mana And he says, Ma chomesh b'chol shana v'shana? Could this actually be that every year, year in and year out, I have to give a chomesh? L'chabei shanim, hu mafsid kula. What's he left with after 5 years? He's in the poorhouse. He's got nothing left. Amalei b'tchila, when he gives the first chomesh, that's b'keren. Mikan v'yelech l'schar. That's the Yerushalmi. And we're going to soon see that this Yerushalmi is upke paskin in Shulchan Aruch, that you give 20% from your keren, and then whatever revach you get, you get wages and so forth and so on, you give another chomesh. So you start with a chomesh from your keren, and then you go on.
Is he talking about stuff? He's talking about other mitzvahs. Usually when we say chomesh, it's like I don't have a lulav, right? In which case, if you get a lulav for cheaper, you don't need to. So,
well, no, the principle of Usha applies to tzedakah as well. How do I know this? Because the Gemara asked about Mar Ukva. Mar Ukva, on his deathbed, gave away 50% of his possessions. I don't know if his children were very happy about that, but that's, this is what goes on, by the way, in contemporary life. And sometimes the parent gives away his money and he cuts out his children or he knocks them down. I don't want to get into that. But in any event, it comes out the following. The Gemara asks, how could Rabbi Mar Ukva have given away so much of his assets when Hamavazbeis Al Yavazbeis Yosef Michomish? The Gemara is Machalik Kan Michayev Kan Liachar Misa. That we're only worried if you give away so much of your assets during your lifetime, you'll end up in the poorhouse. You'll be matalas atzma al tzibur. So what good do we get by your giving so much stock? And then at the end of the day, you're going to have to panhandle and impose yourself on the community chest. After his death, we don't have to worry about that. He's not coming to collect stocker. But you see clearly that the principle of Usha, of Al Yivazbis Yoshim Michovish, is not just a din in lulav, esrog, and matzah, but it's a din in stock as well. So the Gemara asked, wait a minute, if you're going to talk about giving a mitzvah of stock of 20% of your assets, do that on an annual basis, you're left with nothing. And the Gemara is machalik in the Yerushalmi between the revach, between the keren and the revach. And if you see on page Nun Gimel, in the next paragraph called the Ulam Rambam, the Rambam says the following. The Rambam has a situation in which there's a dire, urgent need to give tzedakah. He gives many examples. One of them is Pidyon Shvuyim. Another one is Re'evim. There are those who are literally on the verge of starvation. And then there are Rumim who don't have clothes to wear. And the Rambam says that if he wants to do the best he can, you hear this, the best he can, the mitzvah in a muvchar, and he's a chassid, the Rambam writes in Pirush HaMishnayos at the beginning of Peah, then he should give more than a chomesh. But if, on the other hand, he gives up to a chomesh and not beyond a chomesh, even though the need that's urgent and pressing is beyond the chomesh of his nechasim, nevertheless, ein lo avon biyado, there's no avera. He is protected by the takon of Usha, and he doesn't have to give more than a chomesh. Then the Rambam writes, so if anybody wants to see this inside, because this is kedai to see in the text of the Rambam, you'll see in the paragraph Ulam, about 4 lines up before the end of the paragraph, there's a line that starts with the word avol. You have that? Avol im lo mizdami lo dovar me'asher zacharnu. So there's no pressing need. Baruch Hashem, there's no one who's in captivity, no one's dying of starvation, etc., etc. Then yotzi chomesh min harevach v'lo min hakeren v'yitneu b'tzarchei mitzvos. So I'll just read to you the next few lines. The Machaber of the Otzer Ayunim, I don't know his name, but he writes, Mevur midvar, Shematzit tzorach litei min hakeren chomesh, hu rak ba'ofen sheyesh aniyim b'fanav. Look how he differentiates between these two halachas. We said there are 2 machayvim in tzedakah. There's chomesh, starting in. There's keren, and then there's revach. Meinaf gemina. He says the following, that when do we apply the chiyuv of keren, meaning that he has to give 1/5 of his keren, what he has in his bank account, his total assets. That's only if they're aniyim b'fanav. When the Rambam says that he has to give from his revach, the Rambam is addressing all those enumerated cases where there's an urgent need. Im lo nizdamin on lefanov, if there's no urgent need, he doesn't have to give from Karen at all. Eino chayav litin ela min harevach. Again, you have to see how he reads the lashon of the Rambam, which is, again, right now, if you'll grant me, that level of Emudas Chachamim, we'll see how to read that inside the language of the Rambam. But the bottom line is, you see clearly that there are two separate machayvim. One machayev of Keren and another machayev of Revach with an afgemina. When there's an urgent need, then the Rambam says he's got to give chomesh, maybe even more if he can, if he's a chassid. But up to a chomesh, he certainly has to give from the Keren. However, if there's no need, the Rambam says that there's no halach of hafroshim in a Keren. Now we get to Revach, and the Rambam says that even though there's no one there who is in need, he nevertheless has to take from the Revach 20%. What does he do with it? He puts it into the kupas tzedaka, the kupas ha'ir, and so forth and so on. It seems to me that from this whole discussion, there's a halacha of hafrosha min hamamon. Do you follow what I'm saying? We're talking about revach, income. When it comes to Keren, the Rambam says, you know what? Keren is yours. You really have bailus on the Keren. If there's an urgent need, then the mitzvah of tzedakah, the machayev of tzedakah kicks in. But really, from the get-go, this is your mammon. Why? Because it's Keren. This is what you come to. This is how you come to the table. This is how you start your married life. You've got your Keren. But then the Rambam says that although in Keren there's a conditional machayev, namely the tzorech, when it comes to Revach, there's no conditional machayev. The mitzvah of tzedakah automatically kicks in because this is your Revach. This is extra surplus that's coming into your bank account. With regard to that extra surplus, don't touch it. Until when? Until you're mafresh tzedakah. So the concept that I said before of aser to aser, which means to, so to speak, mafresh tzedakah, and therefore the Torah ki'ilu takes you away from your mammon until you're mafresh tzedakah, that will apply to Revach. And that's a new machayev of tzedakah that's irrelevant and unconditional on its tzorech. There's no ani out there. So when we were medayik from the Lashon Rambam to differentiate between the essay and the los aseh, and we said that these are two fundamentally different halachas, and that's why we can be kofel at tzedakah, because the lav is a separate entity. And we were medayik from the Lashon Rambam that what's the nafkamini between the essay and the los aseh? The essay emerges even without an ani hamivakesh, whereas the lav only applies when there is an ani hamivakesh. Umalav enov min anis malim enov, then the los kicks in, and we embellish that with the chiddush of Reb Shmuel that the lav now creates a din isur. Then it could be very well possible that if we take this Rambam here at the beginning of Perek Zayin Mimat Nasaniyim, and we combine it with the Rambam at the beginning of Pirush HaMishnayos Lepeah, if we want to do that, I mean, you don't have to do that, but if you could do that and make, Sholem, the Rambam wrote his Pirush HaMishnayos at the age of 30, he wrote his Mishnah Torah at the age of 60, so 30 years passed by. But if you want to make Sholem between the two, it's possible to say that when the Rambam opens up this Perek Zayin Milchus Matnas Ani with the mitzvah of tzedakah, and we said the mitzvah of tzedakah is not conditional on the fact that there's an ani there, that could be on the revach. When it comes to the revach, the Rambam says there's a separate independent mitzvah say to be mafresh chomesh mina chasav on the revach, on his income, on the wages that he earns. But then when the Rambam gets to the lotas says a whole different story. It's an isa v'heter, and it applies what's the machai because there's a tzorech. Once it becomes isa v'heter, my friends, then it makes no difference whether you're talking about Keren or you're talking about chomesh. I'm sorry, whether you're talking about keren or you're talking about revach. So the distinction between keren and revach applies when there's no ani. And when the mitzvah of tzedakah as a mitzvah saseh emerges unconditionally, without an ani, the Rambam is talking about a case of revach. As far as keren is concerned, keren becomes a din of iser v'heter. So it's possible now we could say the exact opposite of what we said before, but still maintain the same fundamental principle, that within the context of tzedakah, we have both a din mammon and a din iser. The din iser would apply on keren. Why? Because this is your keren, and the Torah says that designate from your keren for the afrasha a chomesh. But he's saying, just one second, let me just think this out again. He's saying that the din of keren is conditional. Just one second. Din of keren. Just let me work this out one more time. The din of keren is conditional on what? On the fact that there's a need. But as far as revach is concerned, there's no such condition. So it means the following. So it's back to what we said before.
Getting the new money in. If you want to use this money, you got to be mafresh.
Correct. And that's a din iser. And that's generated by the lav. And that's the Ram in Halacha Beis, Hara ani amavakesh v'malim einov. Then, just one second. Hara ani amavakesh. Then he violates the lav. Just one second. Now we have to say the lav. We says din iser, but that applies even to keren. Just one second. So again, what is the lav? I'm trying just to find the lav here. The lav, when you see the ani and he has it so okay. So no. I'm confusing two different things. I mean, when the Rambam speaks about pidyon shvuyim, and the Rambam says then you chayev to be mafresh chomesh from what? From keren. He's not talking about haroa ani mavakesh. Umalim Einov. No. Haroa ani mevakesh umalim Einov, which might apply to keren as well as revach, that introduces the iser element on which there's halach of kfiyah that's irrelevant to the din mammon. It's not generated by the din mammon. So the ani who's in front of me generates an iser, like a chiyuv mitzvah, forget about mammon. Whereas, if there's no ani b'fanav, then we have a mitzvah saseh, which the Rambam says only applies to what? To revach, because there's no ani b'fanav. However, if he's aware of the urgent need of someone for funds, then the Rambam would say, based on the Rambam in Pirush HaMishnah, that even from the keren, he has to be mafresh minimally up to a chomesh and midas chasidus beyond the chomesh. So again, let's just try to wrap this up with a kind of review of everything we've said, because it becomes a little bit complicated.
So if you don't have an ani in front of you, it's now in Dinei Mammon land, right? And then if you want to give tzedakah, then if you give less than a fruta, it wouldn't be tzedakah, right? It should be the opposite. Meaning if it's in Mammon land, there shouldn't be malchus. If it's in Isser land,
Eli's talking about whether or not there's kfir. So let's go through that, right? What do we say? We said that if it's a din mammon, then there should not be any kfir because there's no afrushe misura and it's matan schara betzida. So Eli's pointing out that what? That if, what's the case now? We're talking about...
There's no ani in front of you.
There's no ani in front of you.
No ani in front of you. You just want to give tzedakah.
So again, if there's no ani in front of you, so the Rambam introduces the chiyuv of revach, correct? There's no ani in front of you. So we have a chiyuv of revach. So let's go over this. And if there's a chiyuv of revach, right, even though what, there's no urgent need right now, there's no pidyon shvuyim, etc. So the Rambam holds that now you have a chiyuv hafrasha from what? From revach. Okay, so there's no ani in front of you. So if that be the case, just one second. So is that just mitzvah saseh and therefore it's mamon, and therefore matan schara b'tzida, if there's no ani in front of you. But if there's an ani in front of you, then the lav kicks in and then becomes isur. And that's going to apply even to what? Even to the keren. Oh, so that's good. So it comes out like this, that whether it's keren or chomesh, I'm sorry, I keep making the same mistake. Whether it's keren or revach, if there's an ani in front of you, then we could apply the principle of kfir, and you're going to violate the lav, and we're going to make no distinction between keren and revach, meaning even on the keren itself, you'll be obligated. That's in the case of ani b'fanav umalim einav. Now, let's get to the case where he knows that there's an urgent need. Here the Rambam says there's no lav, there's only an essay. He's chayiv to be mafresh even from keren, but here it's only a din mama, and there would be no kfir. Why is there only a din mama? Because he's not being malim einav minat stock. So when the Rambam Pirush Mishnah says that he has to be mafresh from the keren because there's some shavui out there, right, who needs a pigeon, the Rambam is saying he has to be mafresh minat keren, and that's a mitzvah saseh without a lo saseh. If you're medayik in the Rambam here in Mishnah Torah that the lav is conditional on what? On re'iyas ha'inayim. He knows, but that's already a mitzvah of tzedakah as a mitzvah saseh without a lo saseh. But that mitzvah of tzedakah is a chiv mamon, which generates a chiv that includes even keren. So even keren is subject to what? To a chiv mamon without kfir.
You had Karen by both of them, though. With the way you just explained, you have Karen by both of them.
Well, I don't know what you mean by both of them, because sometimes I
both
get
both the Isser, or we've got the Isser and we've got the Aseh.
Right, and we're saying now that the Isur is conditional on what?
The Isser is conditional on Tzarech.
No, on re'iyas ha'inayim.
I don't see a difference. Okay.
Again, no, listen carefully. The Rambam says haroeh ani umalim eina. Right, he's looking at the ani in his eyes, the arbeinayim, and he turns the other way, go fly a kite. So the Rambam says he violates a lav. So the lav generates a din isur with a kfir that applies if he's malim einov bin ariyah. Now we go back to the other case of pinyon shvuyim.
But that's by Karen. That's also by Rebbe.
Again, since yesh b'chlal masayim mana, it's a kal v'chomer. If in the case where he knows about the Shevi, the Rambam says he has to give from the Karen, how much more so if the ani is in front of his eyes and he has a need?
Okay, so
I don't know. Again, you have to think about this.
Where there's the lav, you're taking from the Karen.
Correct. Why? Because if you're taking for the Karen in the case of pinyon shvuyim, which is yediyah without re'iyah, how much more so if you have re'iyah, which is mamela yediyah?
So then if you have, that's the law. So therefore the asay, you would not be taken from the Karen.
No. Now let's go back to the asay. We're talking about an asay where he has a yediyah. He knows that there's an urgent need. There's no lo asay because he's not roeh.
So in the asay, meaning the law always takes from the Karen, but the asay, it depends if there's a big tzorach or just binadol you want to
right. In the case the Rambam says in Pirush HaMishnayos where there's a great need, then even though you don't see the ani in front of you, there's a pinyon shvuyim out there. There's a sign on the outside of the shul that says, "Everybody, please chip in for pinyon shvuyim." The Rambam says you have a mitzvah of tzedakah and a keren, and that mitzvah of tzedakah is independent of the lav. And therefore, according to our presentation, based on Reb Shmuel, it comes out to be a chiyuv mamon, and therefore, as Eli says very well, there'll be a din of matan schara b'tzida, right? Excuse me. There'll be what? But just give me a second. There will be a din of that there's no din of ifrushe meisur, and therefore there would be no din of kfir. Correct? There'll be no din of kfir. We would suspend the din of kfir because we don't have the support of the tzad isur, which is the lav, which generates a frushe meisura. That's case number one, where he knows about pinyon shvuyim, but he doesn't see him in front of his eyes. He doesn't violate a lav of malim es einov, and he only has a din mamon and a mitzvah say, and he's mafresh even from the keren. Now we get to the second case. What's the second case? Wait, let me just get, I want to get the whole picture. So that's case number one, where he has what? He has the idea of an urgent, pressing need for tzedakah. It's not ani befanov, there's no halamas einayim, it becomes a din mamon. If it's a din mamon, then it's matan schar b'tzida, there's no kfiyah, but on the other hand, because of the urgent need and the pressing need, the Rambam says he has to be mafresh even from what? Even from
It's not even
keren.
It's only. Anytime you're talking about a snapshot, a point in time, there is no revach.
Okay,
All you have
but let's say,
what I have now. Revach
okay,
is
I don't
every
know.
time
We didn't get into, Daniel, the details of, I have another shir now, so I apologize. But, you have to think about this very well, if there's an overlap between Karen and Revach or not. But now we get to the second case. What's the second case? Where he has an ani b'fanav. If he has an ani b'fanav, he's malam einayim, then, first of all, as far as the chiyuv is concerned, the chiyuv would apply even to Karen. Why does the chiyuv apply even to Karen? It's a kavachom from Yediyah in the case of Re'iyah, because every Re'iyah incorporates Yediyah as well. Now, is there a lav? And the answer is that since the ani is b'fanav and he's malim einayim, therefore the lav kicks in, and that converts the chiyuv of tzedakah into din isur. Therefore, we kick in afrushe meisura, and therefore there's no din of matan schar b'tzida, but rather on the contrary, there's a din of kfiyah. Where is he giving this money from? And the answer is, if we have the kal v'chomer from Yediyah to Re'iyah, then certainly he would have to give even from the keren. So now, when is there an afkamina between keren and revach? That's in a case, like you say, stam tzedakah. We know that somewhere out there we're collecting for tzedakah. We don't know when we'll need it, who's going to need it. And there, the Rama makes a distinction between keren and revach. As far as keren is concerned, he's completely alleviated from his chiyuv hafrosha. As far as revach is concerned, that he has an absolute unconditional chiyuv of hafrosha from a revach. And here's what we wanted to suggest, that maybe we can talk about isur, as Rav Shmuel calls it. Right? Let's just think for a moment. In the Rambam, it's going to be difficult to say that, because since there's no ani b'fanav, just 1 second. Yeah, there's one thing I just want to clarify that doesn't stim in our whole presentation, and that is the Rambam would say, according to our diuk in the Rambam here, that there's no violation of a lav just based on the general halacha of tzedakah, because he doesn't have an ani b'fanav that he sees. And yet we wanted to suggest that the Rambam Pirush Mishnah says that in such a case, when his revach is coming in, he's making $100, he's got to be mafresh 20% as a din of to be matir tevel, so to speak, through afrosha. And it's strange because there is no lav in that case. So that's where we have a little bit of a nituk, so to speak. So that's something that you have to think about. All right, Rabbosai, thank you very much, and everyone should have a great day. I don't even know if we scratched the surface on the Mitzvah Tzedaka, but I think we did. Out of 5 sections in this essay, I think we covered two out of 5. Right? That's more than a chom. Okay, then let's see if I can figure out this technology here. I'll just do.